Hello and welcome to this edition of Cavendish's podcast. I'm Chris Lee, I'm a director here at Cavendish, and today we're going to be taking a look ahead at next week's budget and unpacking some of the speculation around that. I'm joined by two of my colleagues.
I'm Emma Barnes, I'm a director at Cavendish.
Hi, and I'm Jacob Tilley. I am also a director at Cavendish.
So I think let's kick off with a bit of scene setting. Shall we just talk through a bit of the political context and I suppose the fiscal context as well in terms of what we're going to be looking for next week in Rachel Reeves' budget?
I think the Chancellor has three main audiences that she needs to satisfy in this budget. First, the bond markets. We've seen them be spooked by the actions of previous Chancellors. Then Labour MPs, who again need to be kept happy, and then the general public. And I think it's very much in that order. Absolutely cannot spook the bond markets, need to keep the MPs happy, and then try and keep the general public happy if you can. And the Chancellor has reiterated that her fiscal rules, they are ironclad, they are not for breaking, and that's sort of no borrowing for day-to-day spending, and debt must fall as a percentage of GDP by 2029, 2030. I thought sort of sticking to these rules gives the markets certainty, which is the most important thing that she needs to do. With that sort of 30 billion estimated black hole and some of the things that she's going to have to do and not going to please some of the Labour MPs, it's going to be, say, a tricky budget at best.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem is that Rachel Reeves approached the last budget by saying we've got this big black hole, we're going to take these decisions and that will be the end of it. We won't be facing any more difficult decisions.
I'm not going to come back and ask again, I think is what she said, wasn't it?
And here she is again, probably setting herself up for a difficult budget. And some of the other bits of context are that growth isn't as good and as strong as it should be. We saw last week that growth was 0.1%, I think, and we also know that people are feeling lots of pressure from the cost of living. Their budgets aren't stretching as far as they could do. Prices are going up in the shops, and they're struggling to make ends meet. So these kind of trade-offs between pushing growth and making sure that people are better off at the end of a parliament, which is actually, to be fair, one of people would say is a really strong Labour value, is that reducing inequality, making people better off, are some of the trade-offs she's got.
So a week or so ago, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves went out and did an early morning press conference to set the mood music for the budget, which it's highly unusual. It's never really happened before. And I think the government was sort of trying to explain that is because the budget itself can quite often be about how you're going to sort of slice and dice things on the day, but the political context is sometimes missed. So they were trying to probably get out ahead of the budget a little bit in those terms, but just quite highly unusual. It's not something that would normally happen. I think the key thing about this is that Labour said in their manifesto that they weren't going to put up tax on working people, and within that bucket was NI, income tax and VAT, was those kind of three things. Now, why Labour boxed themselves in that way in a manifesto which was going to presumably last a 5-year parliament, I think that's a question that people are asking.
Yeah, I think this obviously, now in hindsight, we can say this was an error. I don't think any of the parties were particularly honest with the general public ahead of the last election. This was almost certainly going to have to happen. Taxes were almost certainly going to have to go up. The economic picture has not improved in the way that it should be. Even if it had improved somewhat, this was still likely would have to have happened.
And what about other taxes, particularly on business?
I think, going off what we've been reading and sort of what we've been hearing, I think, there's a few things that are going to directly impact business in this budget. I think this is against the backdrop of the employers' NI increase in the last budget, which was, it wasn't well received by business, shall we say. And I think there's probably a desire to probably go a little bit lighter on business this time. However, there's certain things that we're almost certain are going to be in there. So, national living wages is going to go up again. No surprises there. And also, I'm pretty sure they're going to be talking about business rates reform again. So, like Labour have been talking about this for years in opposition and now into government. So, that, I suppose they've called it like the levelling of the playing field between the high street and the digital giants, and sort of how they take that story to the next stages so local businesses actually do feel that something's actually happening on it.
And that is one of the big trade-offs Rachel Reeves has got in this budget. So in figures last week, we saw that unemployment was up.
Yeah.
Vacancies are down quite a bit from where they were post-pandemic. So businesses are really finding there's a big impact on them from the decisions the Chancellor is taking, particularly the rise in national insurance at the last budget. Any further impact on them is going to be really tricky. And we know that, having people employed is good for society as a whole, but it also keeps people off with benefits. It, helps the country grow, increases productivity.
I think there's some interesting things as well, like in terms of speculation around different taxes that we may see coming forwards that are going to be impacting sort of the property sector. I think it's particularly interesting, again, like this kind of twiddling around with NI a little bit. So, whether you stick NI on rental income, for example, for landlords. I mean, again, that's quite interesting. Is this kind of personally linked tax? Does that really work on rental income on landlords? That's probably won't be popular with the landlords, but I imagine it could be quite popular with the public at large. Talk of a mansion tax. I mean, Emma, do you think a mansion tax would sort of make much of a difference? I mean, I don't know. It's again probably quite popular.
And there is the concern that impacts people in more expensive housing areas, right? So maybe
London,
some parts of the country outside London won't see much impact on this, but changes to property tax in particular will hit London and the southeast.
Yeah, and then the final piece of that puzzle, which I think is really interesting, is this kind of floated changes to council tax and how that all kind of shakes out. I mean, council tax is this kind of weird thing. It's kind of based off some like mystical number of, if your property was built in 1993 or whatever it was, this is what your band would be. So it doesn't surprise me that they might be looking at sort of a big sort of council tax reform to sort of up that base and bring a load of money into the treasury that way. But Jacob, I mean, do you think that messing around with council tax is so controversial these days, or do you think people just sort of get on board and they reband it and it's all fine?
So I think there's a reason no one's touched this since the 90s. It's quite politically challenging. It's quite difficult to do. So we'll see. And
I think that's the nature of tax rises essentially, and that is the tightrope that Rachel Reeves is going to have to walk in the budget next week. Tax rises in and of themselves are quite often unpopular and controversial. I mean, if she presses ahead and puts up fuel duty, for example. I mean, we're a nation of car lovers. We love driving, and that's a duty which has traditionally been frozen over and over and over again. But with the fiscal situation, is this going to be the year where it's going to be bumped up? Who knows? It could be in the mix.
So, guys, what do you think people should be keeping an eye on politically outside of the budget over the next 6 months?
Well, should we talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, which is the future of the Prime Minister? So, I mean, we've had a week of really extraordinary briefings that leadership challenges might be on the cards for people. I think from our conversations across the Labour Party, it's really clear that MPs, supporters, advisors are all incredibly fed up with the current situation and are finding the reception to Labour on the doorstep quite challenging. So, there is a question mark over how long the Prime Minister lasts and whether he is still the Prime Minister for the elections in May or if he leaves quite soon after that.
Chris, do you think he will still be the Prime Minister in May?
Yeah, I mean, look, I genuinely think he will. I think what Labour has maybe learned the hard way over the last week or so is that actually shooting yourself in the foot over and over again is not probably a positive thing to do and to get things done. And there's been noises off kind of all over government and the Labour Party in terms of who's briefing what and who was trying to get ahead of what story and denials and pullbacks and all this sort of stuff. But ultimately, whether or not people have followed the story, kind of the ups and downs, and whether people acknowledge that the story has largely been kind of squashed from both sides, I think you could probably say the damage has been done. Like, it leaves Keir Starmer in a weaker position than where he started a couple of weeks ago, because people, it looks like in and around Downing Street, have given some credence to rumours that he's not on firm footing, and that's not a great place to be. A year or so into government, when you won a big majority. I mean, Labour, they should be coming at a lot of this stuff from a place of confidence, really, even when you're doing the tough stuff, right? I mean, and I think Starmer said all the way through his time as the leader of opposition, it's a 10-year plan. And they've got difficult things they need to do. I don't think anybody assumed, particularly in this kind of polarised world in which we live now, that you are going to be popular all of the time. and actually sort of taking difficult decisions can lead to sort of dips in the polls, but you kind of, you stick to your plan and you kind of plough through and you hopefully get to the other side. But when people on your own team or people sort of in the wider Labour movement are not fully kind of on board with that, or fully on board with the fact you're going to have to do difficult things which might impact your popularity, it does leave you in a weaker position. But I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably bringing it back to the budget next week, that, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are entering this budget week with a real sense of unpopularity, that they're not as strong as they would, and they're about to set out and make some decisions that will ultimately be unpopular with Labour MPs, with voters, and could potentially further weaken their position. So I guess we'll see on the reaction over the week or so after the budget whether MPs think that the decisions the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have taken, because they've said that they are together on this. If those decisions are popular with Labour MPs, or if they think that they're going to turn around and say, actually, do you know what, I've had enough, we need to change course if we're going to continue to be running the country.
I do wonder, interested in what you both think. Like, do you think this has been a lot of expectation management on the budget? So it just, when it does get, we get the budget next week, it's not as bad as what they've said it might be, and then does that shore up a position or give them a bit more wiggle room?
It's an old trick that people have done, since the beginning of politics, is say things are going to be really, really bad. So then when they're only really bad, people say, well, at least they're not really, really bad. So it could very well be that this is a bit of a tactic. They've rolled the pitch. They've made people think it's going to be incredibly bad, and it turns out to not be that. So we will see.
I mean, and again, to come back to one of your previous points, Chris, the difference there is that sometimes that briefing that things might be really bad comes in the form of anonymous quotes to newspapers, but the Chancellor actually stood up and told people over their cornflakes that things would be bad. So I think it is going to be quite a challenging statement from her next week.
And just sort of a final thought, really, I suppose, from me. Like we've talked a lot about the last few weeks about Keir Starmer's position as Prime Minister, and how he's been left in a weaker position. But actually, where does Rachel Reeves stand? If she does deliver a budget which is cuts and tax rises, which is as difficult as some have predicted, I mean, Emma, where does that leave her? Do you think her position is secure?
I would say that the Chancellor position is tied to the Prime Minister's. I can't see a world in which she leaves by choice.
Yeah,
Jacob?
I would agree. I think they very much packaged themselves as a dynamic duo. The Prime Minister's hands are on this budget as well. I think it's very difficult for the Chancellor to take the full blame for this. So I think if her future is not secure, then potentially neither is his.
Thanks, guys. That's just about all we've got time for, but thanks so much for taking the time to join us today and listen to what we've had to say. But of course, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Please do take a moment to download our report, and there's loads more information and speculation in there about next week's budget. Thanks very much.